Good evening and welcome back to KTN Weekend Prime. We're discussing the state of Kenya tonight. It is just 2 days to the swearing in of Uhuru Kenyatta as the duly elected president of the Republic of Kenya, a man who will be assuming his second 5-year term in office. But just today in Machakos County, the opposition coalition NASA, led by NASA leader Raila Odinga, has released what is now being referred to as the Manzoni Declaration, a 5-point declaration stating they do not recognize the legitimacy of President Uhuru Kenyatta and the government that he will form thereafter. Well, in studio tonight to analyze it, 5-point declaration by the opposition, is Brian Mutia, who is a governance expert and law scholar. Many thanks for joining us, Brian. We also have Honorable Samson Cherargei, who is the Nandi Senator. Many thanks for joining us. And last but not least, we're expecting Honorable Matthew Zowili, who is the Kisumu Deputy Governor, to join us from our Kisumu studios, but he is not with us yet. We'll be expecting him in the course of this conversation. But of course, gentlemen, this was a much-awaited major announcement, as it was dubbed by the opposition. I don't know what you make of this, Honorable Cherargei. Did it meet your expectations?
Of course, as I said yesterday when we were in the show in the morning, that there would be nothing new that NASA would say. What I saw is just a statement that we're trying to pacify their followers, and also to just inform them that the Canaan journey has been a mirage. I've read the statement and I've heard what they are saying. Some of those issues they are raising are not here, not there, because, for example, they are saying they are now recognizing Raila Odinga and Kalonzo Musyoka as duly elected president. As far as I know, and we are concerned, they are the same people who went to court on after 8 August election, and the presidential elections were nullified. So which law are they using to say Raila Odinga and Kalonzo Musyoka are both duly elected president and duly elected Kalonzo Musyoka? And therefore, it is, in fact, when the Supreme Court did order for an election, which was done on 26 October, it was done and Uhuru Kenyatta was declared elected. That win was validly was upheld by the Supreme Court a fortnight ago. And I think it is a right time now that our brothers from NASA, or now they have mutated into NRM, that they need to come back to reality. They need to come back and agree that this country needs to move forward. This country will not move forward because there is lawlessness, there is economic sabotage, or any kind of threats that might impede the growth of this country.
Right. Yeah. Not only do they not recognize Uhuru Kenyatta as a duly elected president, they also say that on Tuesday they will be holding a parallel rally on the day of the swearing-in, where Raila Odinga will be installed as the people's president. This is in relation to the formation of people's assemblies all across the country, something that has been restrained by Akitui High Court so far. What do you make of this, Brian? And does making Raila the people's president give him the instruments of power, as would Uhuru Kenyatta after the swearing-in?
Thank you, Michelle. I think, first of all, we are wading in deeper waters. The situation is getting murkier day after day. And with the pronouncements that came, or the declaration that came from Manzoni, as I put it, I think it has really complicated the matrix further, because the moment they say, or NASA actually assures its followers that they are going to, swear in Raila and his deputy, I think now we shall be having 2 wings of governance in this country. And I want to quote the Constitution as it is, that the sovereign power under this Constitution is actually sovereign power shall be exercised either, and I want to, bolden that word, either, through directly or through the democratically elected representatives. So the moment we look at the Constitution under Article 1.2, you realize that the two cannot work at the same time together. One has to give way. And I want to say that people's assembly sometimes, and in most cases, works when there is a serious deficit within the democratic principles or provisions that are existing. And the moment we say that there are certain deficits or inadequacies within the democratic process is when we now avail the room for people's assembly. And when I say serious deficits, of course, we have to look into several tenets which govern what we normally call democracy. Do we adhere to the principle of rule of law? Do we adhere to issues to do with transparency and accountability? Are we a nation that abides to all those tenets? If the answer is no, then the room for people's assembly shall be actually given away. But the moment we shall look at our apparatus, if we talk about rule of law, if we look at the organs that govern and dispense matters of law, if we say the judiciary, are we having a robust judicial framework or a setup which is in existence and is able to support that process? If the answer is yes, then I'll tell you there's no vacuum when it comes to matters of dispensing, rule of law, and due process. Right. And therefore, there's no vacuum whatsoever when it comes to that particular issue.
Just perhaps before you move on, what does Article 1.1 of the Constitution says? Because that is what NASA is citing as a basis for them going ahead and forming this People's Assembly.
Absolutely. Article 1, I shall read for you. It talks about the sovereignty of the people, and it says, all sovereign power belongs to the people of Kenya and shall be exercised only in accordance with this constitution. But that statement is not complete because it has to be given some breath of life by Sabbatical 2, which says the people may exercise now the sovereign power that has been mentioned, either directly, or through their democratically elected representatives. Now, when we delve on the issues of elected representatives, we appreciate the existence of the county assemblies, we appreciate the existence of parliament, and we appreciate the existence of the other apparatus such as the judiciary and the executive. The moment you are saying that you are not going to recognize these very apparatus that have been provided in the law, then you are coming up with another parallel system of governance, which is people-driven, which is people assembly. But these two can never work at the same time, because for one to work, for people's assembly, there has to be serious deficits. There has to be serious loopholes within the latter, or the former. And my issue here, as of the statements that have been done, is that you asked whether NASA will be actually mandated by the law to carry on in terms of forming the next government through People's Assembly apparatus. And I will tell you that they do not have the so-called instruments of power, which are actually guaranteed by the same constitution, which we are trying to uphold as a country. And therefore, you shall ask yourself, what are the structures in People's Assembly which are there to warrant a vessel for NASA to use in climbing or to actually administering this country? If those vessels are not there or those structures are not existing, then there is a lacuna in actually the structures that they purport to want to use to ascend to power. Now, Michelle, for the clarity for the people who are actually watching us, we have to understand that this constitution that we actually, voted for in terms of 67% support, has only room for the structures that are existing to support elected leaders, representatives to the people. It does not have structures which are defined here to support People's Assembly sort of formation. Right. And therefore, if we were to follow the People's Assembly as a formation, then we have again to go to this constitution, amend it, and create structures which will now be used as vessels to administer People's Assembly as a new structure of governance.
All right, so that is a completely different conversation. But then, Honorable Cherargei, many are hoping that after the inauguration of President Uhuru Kenyatta, then the country can move forward to healing and national dialogue. But already, NASA, in this declaration, they have stated here that we have not individually or collectively delegated our sovereignty to Uhuru Kenyatta. And in that regard, they are calling upon their members of parliament not to participate even in the vetting of Uhuru Kenyatta's cabinet, something that is likely to stall a lot of the proceedings of the country moving forward. What do you make of this? And what would you say to NASA counterparts, especially in terms of taking part in the vetting process?
I think we have to note that the game plan of NASA or NRM has come, they are now in a serious quagmire, I must admit, and that is why, and you have to note that even the Tuesday that they want to hold some rally in Jacaranda, is that they are now realizing they want to use, they don't want to follow rule of law, because the 26 October elections were sanctioned by the Supreme Court as per Article 138, 140 of the Constitution. Secondly, the rule of law is very clear, and now you can realize they are trying to use people as a human shield. And this, when you see all this, they are trying to create chaotic situation that will make the government buckle in and come in with Nusumkate government. But my colleagues are very, very aware and alive to the provisions of the Constitution, that if you meet consecutively, and some of the committee meetings is part of the standing orders and the law, that if they miss consecutively, they risk being expunged from the parliament. They have been absconding or boycotting since we were sworn in, and it is very interesting that they have not stopped taking their salaries, or they have not appearing in some of the House committee. But what I want to call upon them, as my learned senior has put it aptly, is that this constitution is a compass that has given us direction. And the only platform, if there are any issues that our NASA counterparts wants to do, is to bring to the county assemblies that we have across this country, which is constitutionally created, to bring in, for example, in the Parliament, either in the National Assembly and the Senate, all those issues that they want to do. But I want to tell you, even if they don't participate in the vetting process of cabinet secretaries and senior government officials, it will not start the process of transforming this country. I can tell you for free, and you can take it to the bank, that we have numbers that was a byproduct of democracy. And us in NASA, no, not us in Jubilee, we are willing to engage and ensure that we have so many affiliate parties that are willing to assist in vetting this process. So at the end of the day, whether they want to participate or not, it is up to them. But at the end of the day, it means that they abdicated their roles. And that is why now they have realized, and it is very important that in NASA strongholds, although Kitui petition number 7, I think, is Kitui High Court, which we don't want to delve is because it's a matter in court, is that they have realized that they can no longer handle the responsibility that has been given by the people, and that is why now they are abdicating their responsibilities and want to take it back to Bunge la Mwananchi or People's Assembly. The only avenue that has been created by the law is the platform that is. So the big question is, it is only in Parliament where you can raise resolutions, it can be discussed, it can be put into the law, and that is when the policies of the government can be developed. So even if, and I have heard that it's a sovereignty, and you, my brother has read Article 1.1, Article 1.2. This sovereignty can be exercised either directly or indirectly.
Right.
And these factors, and just to finish up, is that under Article 38, there is a freedom of choice, whether to vote or not vote. But that one, the legitimacy that they are questioning of Uhuru Kenyatta is that the law is very clear that people who cast votes, the law was using that as a yardstick to ensure that when the president is declared validly, it's based on the votes that cast. It is not based on the registered voters that we have in this country.
All right. Would, Brian, then, the impact of these people's assemblies be one that can be ignored in the country moving forward? Because we have 19 leaning opposition counties. Out of those, 12 of them had already passed the motion for the formation of people's assemblies before that restraining order by the High Court. And 19 is quite a large number. So just borrowing from that, because they say it is not a parallel government, it is not a parallel parliament, according to NASA, it is the people's agenda of charting the way forward. But can these people's assemblies be ignored?
Oh, you cannot ignore the essence of people's assembly, because, first of all, it's actually in the Constitution, and it gives them that right to participate in democratization process. The only concern that we have is its legitimacy, in the sense that we cannot, as I mentioned before, Michelle, this constitution does not offer for the two to work or to exist in terms of governing this country at the same time.
Right.
One has to give way to the other. And the problem that we have is that the makers of this constitution delved on a representative sort of governance structure for this country. And they actually came out with a myriad of organs, where people can actually be represented in matters of governance, in terms of their interests. And they talked about parliament, they talked about the executive, they talked about the county governments and the county assemblies, but they did not even mention in anywhere in this constitution where they can give us a tool or a vessel or an organ through which people's assembly can be are used to articulate their interests.
Right.
And therefore, that's a lacuna for People's Assembly. As much as I'm concerned, the idea of People's Assembly is a good one. But sometimes it has to be in a way that most of the time it thrives better when it does not, go parallel with the settings or the powers that are there. Sometimes, if you look at ancient Roman, it used to be there, but it used to give some impetus to the incumbent government of the day.
Right.
And it used to give it some support through People's Assembly, where people could champion their certain interests, where the government is actually having some deficits, where democracy is not being seen to be being exercised. People's Assembly used to come in place to fill those particular gaps. And it used to be a seamless sort of law in terms of the two working together. Now, in our case here, it's the opposite, where one is pulling on the other side. And I think it's unfortunate that we have found ourselves there, because when you say that we are going to, to revisit on this aspect, but it's part of the Manzoni Declaration that Raila, the NASA principle, is going actually to be declared or to be installed as the people's president. I just want to understand from this constitution, which I've read wide and deeply, where is he going to get the instruments of power? Who is going to administer that? What are the provisions in law on who is supposed to do this? I think, to me, I'll say there's none that's provided there. In the Constitution. But the concept is quite okay. The concept is good if it can actually be used to address the inequalities that the government of the day is actually exhibiting.
All right.
And that should be the direction, but not going through a parallel sort of paradigm through the systems that are already existing.
All right, let's focus on that for a moment, Honorable Cherargei, because part of NASA's statement as to why they are forming this People's Assembly, they will be holding the first one in December, that is next month, is because they acknowledge there is a constitution that must be followed in the country, the Constitution 2010. But they say, what if then the state, the government of the day, fails the people through that same constitution? What if leaders become selfish? What if, for some reason, the very essence of the Constitution, service delivery, protection of everybody, the equality in service distribution, is not happening within that constitution? What if the government of the day is going against that very same constitution? What then do the people do to remedy that situation? And that is why they're holding these people's assemblies. What would you say to that?
Thank you. That matter is already in Kitui High Court. So, and I've read their statement. They are saying they want to protect rule of law. Rule of law is not going against what the courts provide for. In fact, I would request that they should be charged with contempt of court, because the only way you can change leadership or power or governance in this country is through the ballot. We don't have any other option, unless by the design or what they behave or look like is if the resistance movement, that is when they transform themselves, that is when they want the power. What we are saying is that the Constitution, there is no day that Jubilee has failed to follow the Constitution. The fact that Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto was declared as president-elect and deputy president-elect was through a process that is creation of the Constitution. When they went to Supreme Court, it was nullified. The same Constitution provided for 60 days that we should provide that the elections, fresh presidential election should be held. It was held on 26 October. The same process went to full circle when Njonjo Muya and Khalif and Honorable Aaron Mao went the petition to the Supreme Court. That matter was dealt with, and the judges, the Supreme Court judges, unanimous that the president was elected validly. So when they say that the government has failed to follow the Constitution, what do they mean? I've seen some aspect they are saying some of the regions are marginalized.
Right.
The same Constitution has provided for procedures on how that inequality or marginalization has been. And as we talk now, this government was formed through a democratic process. So it means we have followed the Constitution to the letter. And some of this, when you hear to some of these issues that NASA is raising, it means that they want to, they are behaving as if they want to overthrow the Constitution. Then we can discuss outside the Constitution. And that is what will not allow. The president said that let us allow to discuss all the processes, including the judicial process, and from there we'll come and sit down and start the healing process.
Yeah, just to delve on that, I think it's a very critical question that you have asked, Michelle. In the event that people are feeling that they are not adequately addressed in terms of matters of, livelihoods, education, and so on, or rather they are not getting the fundamental rights that they are supposed to be provided by the existing government. I think Article 43 of our Constitution actually addresses all those issues in terms of economic and social rights, where it's incumbent, it's actually the obligation of the government of the day to ensure that every citizen is actually able to access basic health care, universal one for that matter, education, highest living standards, and is protected within the existing state organs. And therefore, it's not a matter of begging for that. The government has an obligation. It has a duty, according to the Constitution, to ensure that it does that. It has to address the issues of marginalization, and it has to make sure that every person in this part of this country, regardless of his political or ethnic affiliation, is able to be catered fully by the government of the day. But that also gets some breath of life, fresh breath of life for that matter, in the sense that we also came up with the aspect of devolution, where now everybody, regardless whether any county voted for the president of the day or not, at least the structures that are existing are able to now fill in those gaps in terms of the previous marginalization concept that we used to hear, or narrative for that matter. And therefore, devolution came in handy to ensure that it addresses all the inequalities that used to exist. And therefore, the aspect of people feeling that they are marginalized or they are not feeling part of the government, I think that with the devolution should not arise at all. However, NASA should have some genuine and legitimate also concerns when it comes to dividing the 85% which is remaining at the national level. I think the biggest question is how does NASA agitate for a situation where the 85% is actually spent in an accountable manner, and it also reaches everybody, regardless whether he is an adherent of the party of the day or not. And therefore, that should be one of the legitimate questions that NASA should be actually pushing. And the answer lies in a very squarely with me here, in the sense that the public service itself is a tool where each and everybody has to participate through, again, for employment. And therefore, the honor still remains with the Public Service Commission, to ensure those who are feeling not part of the government are also able to access gainful employment, which again, contributes to that kind of equality and equity also. There's also the aspect of rule of law. We have the organs that are existing today, and those are the courts as well. The same courts that NASA the other day felt they were on their side, but when Maraga actually ruled that the president was not validly elected, and therefore he called for another election, they were okay with him until the moment when things did not go their way. And therefore, we have to look at all these apparatus, all these different spheres. Whichever aspect does not favor us, we have to find a mechanism through national dialogue again, which is an issue that we need to delve further with you, Michelle, and see how do we also create a room, an avenue for others to come and talk with those who are being perceived to have the haves and the have-nots, in a situation where they can talk together and understand or interrogate matters further on where do these parties feel aggrieved? Where do they feel left out? Where do they feel they are not part of the government? So that now that bridge can be narrowed further, so that everybody can feel part and parcel of it in a principle of inclusivity.
And of course, President Uhuru Kenyatta says those talks will only begin after his swearing in, and that they're being the bone of contention. Honorable Cherargei, please.
What we are saying is that we are asking where, if you think the government has failed or is it infringing on their rights, he has actually put that we have courts of law. And then number two, the issue of devolution, and I want to agree, it is the Jubilee government for the last 5 years. Remember, this constitution, although it was promulgated early before the general elections of 2013, it is Jubilee who has midwifed all this devolution. As we talk, all functions that are provided by the schedule of the constitution have been devolved. As we talk, at least 43% has provided for Article 210 of at least 15% of latest audited accounts or money or revenue goes to the devolution. And as we talk, Jubilee has put that to around 43%. Based on, we can see developments that devolution has produced. So the issue is, in fact, that is one of the tools we can address inequality or marginalization, because the funds that are released to counties across 47 does not based whether you voted for Jubilee or not. As we talk, the Commission of Revenue Allocation has developed a formula, and that is why you have Kakamega, Turkana, which voted for NASA, or has the highest allocation of revenue, and some of these regions also have been allocated money through equalization fund. So when you listen to them, and Jubilee is committed, and they will ensure that this devolution works for the benefit of all of us, and we agree, even as we talk, when some of these people talk, it is that the public service, as we talk, when you look at the major appointments, starting from the executive, it reflects the regional balance. It reflects the face of Kenya as provided for under Article 10 of the Constitution of Kenya.
All right, Brian, you don't seem to agree with that.
I think we have some issues to do the public service in this country, and I just want to delve on the report that was actually unveiled the other day by, I don't know whether it's Sarah Seremo, which organization actually did so. But we could see there were some serious gaps in terms of representation.
Right.
Some communities actually being overrepresented, others actually being marginalized. And therefore, the onus still remains with the powers of the executive to ensure that they create a room for other communities also to be represented and to also feel part and parcel of the government. But also on matters of devolution, Michelle, I would want also to urge the executive to ensure that they protect devolution by all means possible, because the moment they actually close the tap and start, giving the provisions that are supposed to go to the counties in bits or in drops, I think now you'll be actually agitating for people at the grassroots to fight more vigorously to feel part and parcel of the government. But the moment you let the taps, flow, as stipulated by the Constitution, their rightful share in terms of the 15%, I think people will not be so much, focused at the national level, because they will be feeling actually adequately addressed as far as the grassroots interests are concerned.
And of course,
but you need to appreciate also there is difference between equality and equitable, or equity and equality. So in fact, in as much that report was released, you have also to look this. That is why we have a particular formula through CRA or population index that we have in this country, poverty index and what have you.
Right.
So in as much as we might have one tribe maybe having highest number of, these are some of the things as we grow as a country will be corrected based on equity, not equality.
Of course, these are some of the conversations that need to be had, because the opposition says equality and equity need to go hand in hand in service delivery in the country. Many thanks for speaking to us on the state of Kenya tonight. That is Brian Mutia, who is a governance expert and legal scholar. We also have Honorable Samson Cherargei, who is the Nandi Senator. Remember, we're expected to be joined tonight by Honorable Matthew Zawili, who is the Kisumu Deputy Governor, but he was not able to make it to studio tonight. Well, that brings us to a close on this edition of KTN Weekend Prime. My name is Michelle Ngele. Many thanks for watching. See you again tomorrow. Good night.